Happy Women's History Month, and welcome to Season 3 of Get to Know Women in Energy, where we share the stories, ideas, and achievements of women across the energy industry. In this series, we sit down with trailblazers and industry experts who have and continue to pave the way for women in the energy industry. I'm your host, Ebun Adewole-Dickson. Today, I'm joined by Veronica Henrichsen, assistant driller at Odfjell Technology. Veronica has been with Odfjell Technology for almost 10 years and has played vital roles in several different offshore installations. As a Level 3 International Well-Controlled Forum Certified Engineer, Veronica has participated in several emergency offshore roles, including well control, lifeboat operator, and firefighting and search and rescue team. Veronica, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. I'd like to start off by learning more about you. How did growing up in Norway contribute to your love of the offshore lifestyle?
Growing up in Norway contributed in the manners that, well, first and foremost, the oil and gas industry is Norway's most important industry in regards to economic growth. Therefore, it is well known in the public eye. Furthermore, I grew up on the coast, the west coast of Norway, in a city called Bergen, in a neighborhood where a lot of my neighborhood friends, or childhood friends, if you like, had fathers working in the oil and gas industry, and more specifically, some of them worked offshore. So that made me familiar with the offshore lifestyle during childhood. With that being said, I didn't really plan starting my career offshore very early on. I originally went down a path of general studies, which at the time quickly proved to not be the best match due to me being quite young, not really knowing who I was, not really knowing what I wanted to do. So that made me take a few steps back and reassess how do I ensure progress whilst trying to figure out what I want to do with my life, as I'm sure a lot of both women and men faces sometimes. So going back into my childhood and me being familiar with the offshore lifestyle, I came to the realization that the guys I knew back then worked for 2 weeks on, and then they had 4 whole weeks off. That enabled me to not only start my profession offshore and doing that and ensuring progress, which is what I wanted, but I could also do education simultaneously as holding a full-time position offshore, which is what I truly wanted to ensure at the time. So going back into the question on how it contributed to my love of the offshore lifestyle, I'd say it more so ensured my familiarization with it and knowing of it as an option, and then again me picking that at the time. And now that I've always done it for a decade, I must say I do love the lifestyle. I enjoy working that intensely when you're at work, and then I also like the spare time when I'm off, again enabling me to do education, travel, and giving me a very free lifestyle, let's say.
Thank you for sharing. It's very interesting. I agree. Our industry has a lot of flexibility, which is awesome, and a lot of different roles. So it's great that you're able to do other things in the time that you had off.
Yeah.
So you began your career as a drilling and maintenance operator. Can you tell us how you made the transition to your current role?
Yes. So I'd say there's two aspects to this. One of them is the mental part, whereas when I held my position as a drilling and maintenance operator, I looked at the guys holding the assistant driller roles or the driller roles or other roles that was, I'd say, higher up in the hierarchy. So I looked at those guys and I thought to myself, this seems like an interesting job and I can see myself doing this. So with that being established, I've always been kind of career driven. So I've always been hungry for information, opportunities, and stuff like that. So that's the mental aspect of it for me. And then there's the physical aspects of it, because to qualify for these high positions, there's quite a few qualifying educational requirements you have to go through. So for example, you have to go back to school. You have to do 2 to 3 years of a technical drilling engineering school. And then, as you mentioned in my very introduction, you do have to be certified at least level 3 in the drilling well forum, better known as EWCF. So that's really the aspects of it. And the transition itself, when you get the role, you kind of pave the path whilst you're walking it. And you're supported at all times by colleagues. You're never alone. There's obviously people around you with more competence. So it went naturally, I'd say.
Well, that's great to know. I'm sure this is a perfect little overview for those that are hoping to go through the same transition that you did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us more about your duties as an assistant driller? What does your day in the life look like in this role?
You know what? One of the things I actually enjoy the most about my profession and working offshore as a whole is actually the fact that no days look alike, even no trips look alike. A year doesn't look alike. So, and this is due to creating a well is very complex, and it can take anywhere from 3 months to over a year, depending on how long is the well. Again, the complexity of it. Do we have any challenges occurring along the way and so forth. So I can't give you the typical task or the typical day, but I can give you like the broad strokes of what I might face during a trip, which is, as an assistant driller, the thing I can start off by saying is you kind of go, when you're drilling a maintenance operator, your focus is on the operation as of right now. Whereas when you're transitioning into the assistant driller role, you go from that to you have to prepare upcoming operations as well. So there's several aspects now that you have to take into consideration. So what I do is I have the responsibility of checking that our well control equipment has the correct settings, meaning pressure, hydraulic pressure, air pressure, pressure testing that equipment and making sure it's safe for use. And then again, as the name might suggest, as an assistant driller, I'm assisting a driller. So the driller is mostly stuck in a driller's chair and in a driller's cabin. So the driller is dependent on me providing information, whether that information about tools in the well, about formation, about pressure, about drilling fluid. So I'm kind of a person in between in many ways. So I do that, and I also have to rely the driller from their tasks and make sure they get their breaks. Because again, we work for 12 hours and we only get 2 breaks during that time. So it's important that the driller also gets to have a break and kind of refresh the mind, because it can be kind of demanding and tiring to look at screens all day, interpreting the well, interpreting what is happening, and there's a lot of stuff to think about. So it's important to take breaks. Furthermore, as I mentioned earlier on, I have to prepare for upcoming operations. That can be a lot of different things. I do delegate a lot to the positions who work more closely to the floor, making them check the equipment, making them check that it's available and in good condition for future operations. And then I have to cooperate with third parties, which typically owns, I'd say, the more complex tools and drill strings that is going into the well. So we cooperate, and then we have to report every details to these tools, because as an assistant driller, you are expected to know the details of everything going into the well. In case of an incident or an accident or something similar, you have to know what do we do now? What is the specific details to anything that's down there, so that we know how we're supposed to attack it and kind of fix the problems. More than that, in addition to that, I'd say, I also do quite a bit of calculations. That can be the position of the drill string, because we have to hit a certain point with a certain tool. It can be how much drilling fluid do we have to pump to get this effect, and similar stuff to that. And lastly, I have to report everything that we do. So every day, and this is every day actually, the one thing that's always getting in my way is I have to report everything that happens in a drilling report, to not only to be able to go back again if we have an incident, something's unclear and so forth, but also because we have a whole organization on shore paying attention to what we're doing, and they also need the details because they don't see our screens and stuff like that. So I write down every detail and everything that's happened, so they get access to the same information that we have.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. It seems that like no day looks alike in your world, which is awesome. And you know, let you be prepared for anything.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So on those same lines, as a woman, has there been anything that surprised you while working on the drill floor?
I'd say there's certainly been several things that surprised me. I must admit, I was a bit surprised in the very beginning of how capable I was going into a male dominated field such as this one. Again, I was the only woman on my crew, which was a weird experience in the very beginning. And when I say that, I don't only mean like the physical aspects of the job. I also talk about the technicality, my capability to learn and understand the different systems on the rig without having much experience in any similar field in advance. In addition to that, I will say I'm surprised by human adaptability as going into the petroleum industry, like regardless of how you think about it, regardless of me being a bit familiar with it during my childhood and stuff like that, it's really going into something unknown and something you've never seen before, both in regards to the equipment, but also environmentally wise. I'd even go so long as to say that the environment is somehow institutionalized as it's quite isolated from the rest of the world, meaning that it's in close proximity and that creates kind of a unique environment in the workforce. So, and the fact that that transition to me felt natural was very surprising. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, going into this field as a woman with very few or no idols to look up to of the same gender, I must say I did worry at times that this career path was going to be very hard to climb as I'm career driven and I wanted to achieve something and I wanted to be sure that opportunities would come my way as well. So what I'm very glad to be able to say is that the drilling field I've been exposed to and that I've experienced has proven to me time and time again that discrimination based on gender is not tolerated. And I am kind of living proof to that, really, because I would never be in an assistant driller position this early on in my career if that was a fact. So I'd say those three things is what surprised me the most as a woman.
Thank you for those insights. You said, going into the industry, you're a bit worried because you didn't have any women idols that were in your position, but now you're an idol to other women that looking forward to getting that position or working on the drill floor or as a driller. So yeah, it's awesome. And earlier you talked about how no day looks alike in your world, and you've learned different things. On the same lines, I saw on your LinkedIn that you recently shared that you earned a certification as a lifeboat operator. So, what interested you in pursuing such a specialized skill as that?
I'd say the lifeboat operator as the specific task goes under the category of emergency preparedness. And emergency preparedness is a very natural part of the offshore life. In Norway, you're actually not allowed to travel offshore before you've been truly introduced to it because we have to do certain courses we have to practice survival at sea. We have to practice evacuating a helicopter underwater, which is flipped around. We have to learn firefighting, CPR, first aid on a level I would say is a bit higher than your general knowledge. So you're introduced early on there, not even again being allowed to travel offshore without those courses. And then going into the drilling specifically, it follows you throughout your career. So even as a drilling and maintenance operator, you do have emergency preparedness roles in well control. So you have certain tasks you're expected to perform if an incident occurs. As an assistant driller, that continues to be the case. It only changes what you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to catch, and what is expected of you during a well control incident. So with that being said, I think it's not so much the specific wish to do the lifeboat. It's more so the emergency preparedness as a whole. Again, since we're isolated, and it's important to remember that we have to be our own firefighters. We have to be our own search and rescue teams if anyone goes missing. we have to have our own little hospital, and we certainly have to know CPR and stuff like that, because there's no ambulances or anything similar coming our way. Surely, if a big accident occurs, external resources will come after a while, but most often we have to self-provide in that manner. So for me, again, it's the heart for emergency preparedness. And then again, not only the physical aspects, like not only preparing the boat for dropping, not only preparing the firefighting equipment, it's also very much about the psychology behind it, meaning leading people during emergencies where there not only be a lot of stress, people may panic, there's going to be a bit of anxiety where people typically search for an anchor, for safety, for guidance. So, and I'm also honored and interested in holding that type of responsibility, as those type of courses, which I actually mentioned on the LinkedIn post, gives you invaluable insight in who you are and how you deal with that stuff, and even if you're capable of holding such responsibilities. So I'd say, as a whole, my heart for emergency preparedness is what made me interested in that specific role.
Wow, thank you for sharing. I would have never guessed that a role like yours would have so many things tied into it. And I think for things like that, when it comes to emergency preparedness, and knowing how to be calm in the middle of, something very dangerous happens, is not, only necessary for our industry, for just, in general and as a whole. So that's
Big
very, very
time.
interesting. And it's good for other people to know that that's going to be part of it.
Yeah, big time.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I guess in addition to that and learning those kind of skills, are there any other skills you believe are essential to have in order to be successful in drilling operations?
I'd say a willingness to constantly learn. Going back to the fact that no days and no trips, even no years look alike. There's a lot of unknown in creating a well, because we're making holes in the ground to make it very simple, and a lot of stuff will occur that's unseen and unexpected. So you have to learn, and you have to, I'd say, also keep it cool during pressure. That is actually a personality trait I think you will gain just by going into the drilling specifically, because there will be a bit of pressure. It's kind of fast paced, especially as an assistant driller and a driller. You're going to sit and constantly interpret what is happening in the well. So it's important to be able to keep the cool even when you're kind of pressured, because you're really the only one who's capable of doing that very job. So the rest of the team is dependent on that. Furthermore, I'd say precision, being precise. And when I say that, I think about doing these calculations, because it's very important that they're precise, because there will actually be potential negative consequences if there's any fault in the calculation. So it's very important to be precise and take it very seriously when you perform this type of stuff. And if I were to say a few keywords, I'd say, and I think this is very universal, I'd say perseverance, stay in it, dare to be uncomfortable, dare to be intimidated, and be determined, and then have a little bit of patience.
All great insights. And that perfectly leads into my last question here for you. You say, prepare to, maybe be intimidated or hold yourself highly. On the same lines, what advice would you give young female professionals that are interested in working in offshore operations, but may be intimidated of possibly being the only woman on their team?
Oh, to those, I would say, and I truly mean this, I truly, truly mean it, dare to go into the intimidating stuff. Dare to do it scared. Dare to do things where there might be possible negative outcomes, or you're afraid you're not going to be capable of doing, you don't have enough competence. Dare to be uncomfortable and intimidating. Because if you ask me, when you're intimidated or you're uncomfortable, even scared, that is the perfect indication that there's a lack of knowledge somewhere. Because if you knew a lot about it, and if you knew exactly how you were going to attack it and stuff like that, you wouldn't be intimidated. And I'd also say, being the only woman, which I've been a lot of times, and luckily more and more women are coming into the field, but regardless of that, being the only women, again, in the same manner as emergency preparedness roles, it gives you invaluable insight in who you are and how you stand your ground. And it gives you the opportunity, potentially very early on in your career, to kind of figure out a few things about your personality and the way you go about things so that you can improve for times where it matters more, I'd say. So, to keep it short, dare to be uncomfortable, scared, and intimidated, because I promise you, you belong. You do so belong. It's so healthy for the environment to get women in there, and you are capable and you are going to do, if not as good as a job as the guys, then even better.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today, Veronica, and sharing your valuable insights. Your unique experiences and advice are a great source of information for young professionals interested in expanding their knowledge in specialized areas in the oil and gas industry. So we really appreciate having you on.
And I
Um,
appreciate you guys having me. It was lovely. I'm grateful.
Same here. You can follow Veronica's journey by connecting with her on LinkedIn. Her profile will be linked in the description. And Veronica, thank you once again for being a part of this conversation.
Thank you.
You can watch the Get to Know Women in Energy series anytime on demand. Visit SPE's Energy Stream site at streaming.spe.org. I'm Ebun Adewole-Dickson, and we'll see you next time on Get to Know.